behaving like an employee. The design intent translating to reality, actually there to cut the ribbon for the inauguration. So the best part about these very, very large scale projects.
Welcome to another episode of Architecture Playbook Intent to Impact, where we talk about everything which starts from design till execution, what happens in between.
Yeah.
Today, we are honored to have architect Vijaya Bhargav, a co founder and partner at Ostraca Architecture and Interiors, a practice that has been shaping meaningful spaces across India since 2008. With over 29 years of experience and have delivered 35 million square feet of project across corporate, institutional, hospitality, and residential sector, her work reflects a deep understanding of both design and execution. At Ostraca, the philosophy is simple and yet powerful to create spaces that combine functional and requirements with timeless aesthetics while staying deep to the client centric. Beyond practice, she is also actively involved in the industry platforms IIID Bangalore, Vice President of Wiki Karnataka Architecture Council, and active member of WireNet and TRW, and also has contributed to education, sustainability, and cultural initiatives. In today's conversation, we'll explore her journey, the realities of large scale projects, design decision making, execution challenges, and what architects need to understand to build better practices. We welcome you, ma'am, to our podcast. We are very glad to have you here.
Thanks, Aditya, for this invite. I'm really excited to do this podcast.
Ma'am, what started you to start Ostraca in the early age when you just graduated, and what was the initial point? And as you were practicing, how did you start in managing large scale project?
Yeah, so I haven't really started my practice immediately after I graduated. So I worked with a large firm of repute, Upal Ghosh Associates. I've started uh, as a architect there, and I worked there for about 8 years. And while I was working there, it was just not about doing the drafting or maybe managing projects. I always thought, I belong here. So what can I do, more than what I'm expected to do? So that was my start point. And I would always discuss with my architects, our bosses basically, and say that, hey, you know what, there is an opportunity out there, let's pitch it. So there were times that I would go with them and pitch for that project, so those kind of things. So that is something which I always tell my younger architects in the studio, because you should stop behaving like an employee. You should always behave more like a entrepreneur, I would say, so that the growth of the company is also dictated by what your performance is, and then even your bosses see the merit in what you do and what you get to the table. And it starts from the junior level. For that, you really need not be a senior architect.
When you started your own practice, uh, what was your first big project?
So it was quite interesting because it wasn't really a planned decision. So my current business partner Arnab Ghosh, we both used to work for this firm, and we had this opportunity of doing some interiors which we pitched for, and that was with L&T. And L&T also was new to interior projects, but they wanted to kind of do a design build in their facility out in Bangalore. That was the first time that they are trying out in Bangalore. And we said, okay, let's partner with no obligation of getting the project. We pitched along with them for a RFP, and we cracked it. And that whole synergy worked really well for us. And after that, one led to the other. We basically did the same thing in Cochin and their own facilities. They started building for the corporate clients, and in that case it was TCS. So our interaction and rather the journey with TCS started there. So one led to the other. So yeah, so that was my journey.
So looking back in the early years, what was the biggest challenge which you faced when you started the firm?
So like how I mentioned, while I was working with my earlier firm,
Hmm.
I was actually taking care of, like how I mentioned, though it was not expected of me, I started scouting for projects. So business development was pretty much down my alley. Then working on the projects anyway you are trained for. After that, if you look at, even getting the money from the clients, stage-wide payments. So I used to take care of that also. And obviously then hand over a bit of it. So broadly, if you kind of look at the project cycle, that would all be like handled by me. So having my own office only meant that, I had to pay my employees. That was the only added responsibility which came by. But otherwise, all other roles I've already done it in the earlier firm. But having said that, the challenge is about how you kind of restructure yourself is very, very important. In one of the projects, in fact, when we started our firm, it was in 2008. And 2008 is the year of recession, and not many projects in the market. But then we already had a project in hand.
Mm.
Having said that, since it was a very large project, there were a lot of legalities and
Paperworks to be added.
yeah, a lot of things which needed attention, which I wasn't really familiar.
Mm.
So it was all about learning about things, and it was like literally you are pushed into the water to swim, and you figure out, because you don't want to die. So you really work around and do that. So now, of course, it becomes a cakewalk because you've been there, done that. But having said that, and in one of the projects, we were asked to do the even project management. So
Mhm.
had no idea of how to kind of even do these use of project management tools and all. But we learned. I knew, I learned how to make a Gantt chart. Maybe someone who is in a PMC field would have done it for half an hour, but I took the whole day to do that. But it learned, in the whole process. So it's all about that. Like if you have a focus of completing a project, whatever it calls for, upskilling yourself, or learning new tools, and working or finding the right resources. But when you start a firm, you are not really equipped with too much of cash flows. So you
Correct.
really also have to optimize how much you can outsource to others. So there are a lot of these challenges, but retrospect, it was all fun.
That's amazing, ma'am.
Yeah.
That's so much of insightful things which makes me also remember how I started my journey as an architect.
So
Having worked on to the million square feet projects, ma'am, how did you worked on to the changes which happened on site?
So the best part about these very, very large scale projects, unlike maybe small residential projects, everything is structured. So you already have a cost consultant in place. You have PMCs in place. You have, of course, the client team which is in place, who are all very, very experienced. So as long as you're process driven, uh, which most of the architects are not, because we romanticize the design and there it ends. But if you really, from day one, you should know the kind of carpet which you're using. And you can't just say that, I want Ovala blue and things like that. You can't keep on changing too much from the already set BOQs. So while you start your first line, you should know exactly what it is, what brand, or also you can't obviously give one brand, you have to give three makes and all that. So these are some things which you need to train yourself. So, and in the whole process, all of them teach you that, the PMCs, the cost consultants, everyone teach you that. And once you do that, unknowingly it becomes your second self. So if you are changing a design because you don't like something, inherently I start thinking that what is the cost impact of this if I do this change. So these are the things which you kind of get to know, and that is the best part about working in large jobs and also with a lot of experts around you.
So, what is the fundamental difference between a large scale corporate project or a small residential project? What do you find the difference in both of them?
So, like how I mentioned earlier, the large scale projects are quite structured because they all have these PMCs and cost consultants and the client representatives from the infrastructure department of their respective corporates, who come with a humongous amount of experience, and processes are in place. They're very, very process driven. In residences, they're bespoke. So everything is customized to a liking, and changes. It's just the stakeholder is one single person. Decision making in a way is easier because it's like one person out there. In larger projects, if you just make one decision, it has to go through some 4 or 5 processes and then come back. Even if it is maybe a change of a tiny detail, like a size of a table changing from, let's say, 2400 to 2100, you need to take all these clearances, and you don't have these kind of things in residences, right? So
Okay.
maybe if you feel that this particular table or this particular detail does adds value to your existing design, you just go quickly, make a call to your client and say, this is what I intend to do. It may not really upset your budget or whatever, or it would cost this delta or whatever. It's over a quick call, it finishes. But then in a large project, however small the changes, everything is structured, and it has to go to the through the whole system, and all the stakeholders should be aware of this whole system. So
So
that's the
how do
thing.
you communicate for such a large audience of client? If you, how do you communicate
So there are
right now?
already protocols in place for all the large projects.
Okay.
So even before project starts,
Hmm.
there is a kickoff meeting which happens.
Hmm.
In that, it's clearly stated for which stage who all should be looped in that mail, and what is the process, and all these things are always
It is like
given to you.
tracking each and every meeting which you have
Yeah,
with the
so we
client.
obviously have weekly meetings. In that, we also talk about what has been a deviation, what has been. So they obviously necessarily talk about, let's say, what are the design details pending from your end, and what are the things which are affecting the project completion. Has there been any change of budget? Or, for example, let's say we would have specified a material,
Hmm.
and for some reason, there is a delay in that material
Right.
delivery at site. So what is that impact? And so risk management and things like that. So all these are pretty well documented in a way, and also they are talked about in every single meeting, and whatever you talk, it's all minuted, so everything is structured. So
Right.
it's not really people dependent. Once the process is placed, whether I am there or some representation from my office is there, things go. Like, it's like I would always call whatever we are dealing with the large project as like assembly line. So it's all prefixed one after the other, and if something is taking more time for some reason, there should be a justification immediately given why it happened. And for some reason, the justification you are giving is because of your fault or something, you'll be pulled up. There are a lot of things that way, and there are heavy penalties which are slapped against an architect or a PMC or anyone if you basically deviate from the process. Whereas in residences, you don't really have that.
Yes.
Either the client is good to you or not good to you. It just ends there.
Yeah, the
Whereas this one
accountability is
has,
very
yeah, a
good.
lot of legal implications also.
You are
So
right.
if you basically take up a large projects, you really, really have to be good in processes, and you should structure your project, and the timelines have to be followed to the T. And you should be conscious about the costs and cost overruns, if any, or change in specifications,
Right.
everything. So that's very, very important.
So, ma'am, how do you ensure that the design decisions which are done on site is driven by the users and not by the designer's preferences?
So in corporates, it works a little differently.
Hmm.
It's not that like a residential client who is making one house in a lifetime or second house, for themselves. They all come with something called playbooks. So they always document things, what their requirements are, and some of them even have their preferences of colors, textures, and things like that. They would also give us an indication, these are the primary colors. We need to use them like, 70% of the colors should be these colors, then 30% is, this particular color. So they give you a direction. So it's very difficult to go away from what they're expecting. And obviously, we have various levels, right? So we make the look and feel, so we show them, uh, and we show pretty much every corner of the space that we are designing, so that there is no disconnect. And once that approval process is done, very little changes after that. We also indicate, what that means, whether it's a wallpaper, whether it's a texture paint, whether it's regular paint. We are very clear in what we kind of show to the client. It is not saying that, this is your view and after that, whatever comes to your mind or your preference, it happens. No, because they are too large to go wrong to
Yes.
start with. And so that way, and it's not that every day you get to speak to the end user. In this case, a CEO, CFO doesn't have all the time of whole year or 6 months to spend with you to see whether he's getting things right or not. You brief hardly get maybe half hour of their time, and you have to basically tell them what you think about your design, starting from the layout planning to how it's going to look, and also how it is aligned to their culture. So a lot of things have to be explained to them, after which we get a sign off from the main guys. And after that, their infra team takes over, and they monitor whether, what their management is expecting is translated to this. And not many times, the management gets time to see the facility while it's getting ready and all they would do is that maybe we'll initially interact with them for the design presentation. After that, we see them next when they are actually there to cut the ribbon for the inauguration. That's how it happens.
Okay, okay, okay.
And so we also do this for our own fun, like how we kind of represented that space, and exactly the same angle we take a photograph and we show this is actually the render, this is the actual photograph. And so if I don't write that down, it's very difficult for you to figure out what actually was a render and what is the actually constructed thing. So it will be that close.
I want to also understand what goes into actually execution when you are not much under like aware of what who are the end users, because you are not interacting with the staff or the, as an architect, how do you make those decisions then?
Yeah, so before even we start working on the layout, it's first of all, if it's a new client, we go to their workspaces, we understand what the culture is, how people are using their spaces. And let us say at times the designer would have thought, okay, this is a nice place. Then you see people, moving the furniture and placing them closer to that, work cluster. That means that, that work cluster needs collaboration. So immediately we make a note and say that, okay, this team needs more collaboration. So we maybe, place a discussion table. So it's all about going to their spaces, understanding. Then we sit with their HR teams. We sit with their project teams. So we understand what aspirations they have for their workspaces. After doing all this study, then also if people are a multinational client, we obviously Google pictures or we request them for pictures from their existing facilities across the world, because there should be a parity, right? If there is a brand which is in India or Asia or Europe or whatever, all those spaces should have some kind of a thread which binds them. It might be culturally designed for their existing facility in India, but they should have some kind of a similarity also across the globe. So these are the few studies that we do, and that's when we actually start the design. Post that, of course, in these kind of design discussions on the look and feel and all other aspects, the fine tuning happens. And finally, whatever result comes is pretty much aligned to whatever they're expecting.
At Architecture Playbook, we often discuss the intent gap, which is from the design to execution. So, where do you see this gap when it comes to a large scale project?
Yeah, so these gaps don't really happen in large scale projects because, like how I discussed earlier, you have a lot of teams working on these. And they have their own tools. The PMC has a PM tool, the cost consultant have their own tools. And the architect basically works along with all these teams. So you don't really need these kind of requirement. So this particular tool, I think, is ideal for residences. And as we discussed also earlier, basically maximum construction, 70% of the construction is residential. So it really helps that because, there are no, obviously a person who's making a home can't afford a cost consultant and, PMC and things like that. So this particular tool clearly replaces all of them. And the kind of price at which it comes, it's like amazing, like, so I really see a lot of future for this. And as we are aware, now a lot of people are tech savvy, and any person who is making a house, unlike the old times, right? So I'm sure people will have fun in doing this, and I see a lot of advantage in using this tool. I really, really like this.
So, can you share us a situation where the execution went wrong for a large scale project when it started from design till when it was coming on site?
So yeah, I mean, things happen. It's very idealistic to think that, no, in spite of all these systems in place, that everything goes smooth. Of course, they happen. So there are two things. If they are grossly wrong for a reason, then basically we get it replaced. But there are times when there is a challenge on timeline, and or something, lot of money has been spent. Then obviously architect has to get on back to his creativity to look into, redesigning things and making sure that the actual intent is not compromised. Yeah, but they actually don't really happen in a very large scale, because every time we do a large project, every single, for example, if you do a project which is large, you have 60 discussion rooms, and some 50 printer areas, few clusters of toilets, and ceiling systems which run into few thousands of square meters. We always do something called mock-up evaluation, where a small part of it is done by the contractor with the exact materiality, including all services, how the air con comes, how the light fixture comes, how a fire system is working, and how the sprinkler is mounted, if there is an AV system coming in, where it is going to be mounted. All these things, there is a mock-up drill which happens. So, and all the stakeholders, starting from the client to the architect to the PMC, everyone comes there and sees. And that is when you can figure out whether there is a gap in between the design and your execution, or if there are any site challenges. For example, you would have envisaged that, the ceiling height would be some 3 meters, but is it reducing because of some kind of a detail of the structure which is coming in the way? All these things come during the mock-up time. So once that mock-up evaluation happens, then the whole thing gets done in larger scale. So usually all these errors are arrested at that stage.
With the large clients and multiple stakeholders involved in one project, how do you make better decisions on site with them?
So like how I mentioned, all the design decisions are made initially during your design stage itself. But obviously, like, there are some things which pop up on the site because of things which are beyond your control. So during that time, that is when the weekly meetings, help, where the problems are discussed, and solutions are given on the site. And while the solutions are given, we also do an evaluation back end, what that affects, right? Like, while making a decision, maybe is it changing some other sprinkler pipe, or is it changing some kind of an electrical duct which is already there, so these kind of things are thought through. In this case, architecture design is not in isolation. We also work with our consultants, and in the larger projects, we also have BIM implementation. So whatever changes which come up during the site execution or whatever are always looked into in the BIM modeling, and see what that is affecting, and make sure that the decision what we are making is clash free, and that's when the design decision is relayed to the site.
So, ma'am, in the large scale projects which you are doing, have you ever experienced that the outdated drawings are used by the stakeholders, even it can be contractor or which is given back to the client, where they would be working on it on site but not getting the updates which were done by the discussions?
Yeah, after all the processes in place, this is one thing which happens, I would say not so frequently, but yeah, it happens. And so that's when we always tell the site team that whenever we are releasing the new drawing, please give back the old drawings so that no one follows those drawings. But
Is it a manual, like is it a hard copy or is it digital?
it's a hard copy because
Okay.
in spite of having the soft copies, there is a mandate that we give about 6 sets of drawings, because this is all part of the contract, where
Okay.
one goes to the client, one goes to the PMC, one goes to the other stakeholders. So it's all with, so 6 copies are always given for every drawing. Um, when any small change happens, all these needs to be replaced. So at times it happens that some old drawing gets into the hands of someone who is executing on the site, and that person maybe is gone on a leave when the change happened, and he continues to work on that. These things happen, but yeah, with a far more attention to these things, this can be avoided. But I don't really see any other thing which can replace this process.
So version control would be done only when you have the new set of drawings. You take back the old drawings
Yeah,
and then you regulate it on
yeah.
site.
So yeah, on the paper it is there. So they'll obviously say that the for this particular drawing it is R11 or R10, whatever. So it is there. But actually, if you see practically, there might be one carpenter who's working with maybe R9, and he'll
Yes.
continue doing with the same thing. That still controlling is a challenge.
Do you think so? If we digitize this process, would it add value to your all stakeholders, including carpenter, clients, contractors, everyone?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, digitization and basically publishing, saying that, guys, for this drawing, this is the latest. And even before someone starts working on that, following that makes sense. But see, this all calls for people being careful about following the process. If someone is not really following the process, then errors do happen.
They will be still on R9.
Yeah.
When the projects go delayed or go off the track, is it more about the accountability of the person or lack of structure, or is it more about the technical issues which are arriving on the site? Where does the delay start happening on a project when it is a large scale project?
So there are many factors which dictate the timelines. So it could be basically the design decisions taken, or revisiting designs, or maybe the choice of materials that you made, availability could have been there. And for example, today you have war basically dictating the timelines of a product, because some of the roofing systems or ceiling systems, they get imported. For example, carpets are a clear example. They get imported from the US, Europe, and all that. So these things happen. So that is where, like, the risk analysis should be done better. And everyone, I always, I'm my favorite analogy is about uh, it's about an orchestra. Orchestra goes well where each one is playing their own thing, and then it's synchronized, right? So even one note which is bad from one person can spoil the whole harmony of the whole thing, right? So that's how it is. Like, everyone has to play their role. And before the project starts, it's very, very important that people talk about whose scope is what, so that people don't come to your part of the work, and each one is taking care of their role, and there are no overlaps. So
Yes.
overlaps are the gray areas. So you should never leave any gray area. See, I can support you or basically help you in doing your work better, but the sole responsibility of, let's say, timeline depends on the PMC. The sole responsibility of controlling the cost depends on a cost consultant. The whole design delivery to whatever we have intended to do, the design intent translating to reality, is the designer's duty. So all these are very, very important. Having said that, because I feel passionate about my design, and I don't want my design to be spoiled because of some other factor, or not someone else not doing their job properly, I'm monitoring things. So at times, there are times that we go back to PMC and ask whether the sub vendor has placed order at the right time, because a lot of these things have lead times. It's not that, like, for example, a rug takes about 5 to 6 weeks. But if you have designed a place with that particular kind of a teal color rug coming in, You can't just go and off the shelf buy a rug of that particular size, right? So you need to be very, very clear of what things constitute your design, plan them accordingly. So otherwise, the initial attention is all about generating the drawings, generating the working drawings, giving it on the site. But a person who is handling the project spock, this is what we train in our studio, that they need to think 2 steps ahead and see whether things are going fine or not. And these are the discussions that you need to have in the weekly meetings when all the stakeholders are present. These are the discussions that you need to have to make sure that all these things go in tandem. And accountability, like how I mentioned, lies each thing, the timeline lies with PMC, and the cost lies with the cost consultant, and the design delivery on the site depends with the architects. So that's what it is.
So, ma'am, have you seen any blame game happening for a large scale project? Because how it goes for you?
Yeah, say blame game happens everywhere, right? Say when everything goes right, everyone takes the credit. But when things go wrong, it's very easy to pass the buck. So, but as a mature designer, it is not about finding fault of who made the mistake and why the project has gone wrong. For all our us designers, project coming the way you envisaged is very, very important, right? So first of all, you should make sure that the mistakes don't happen, right? And the first discussion I always have in my kickoff meetings is we all should work as a team, right? So it's not about like passing the buck. I gave you the drawing yesterday, or you didn't give me the drawing, that's why this got delayed. No. So if the delay is happening, you should basically call me and tell me that, hey, you know what, we thought that this drawing won't affect the timeline, but in this case it is happening. Maybe you need to clear the shop drawings immediately, or whatever, or maybe the material that you suggested here is taking too much time, and this needs to be completed for the other activity to kind of kick in. So this is actually clashing with our timeline. So I always like this kind of a very transparent kind of dialogue between all the stakeholders, so that the project comes fine. I think that comes with maturity.
Ma'am, what do you think about the future of design of architecture? Is it more about the process efficiency or design excellence?
I would like to tell you about the thing. We've got a opportunity to work with few of global firms who have been the concept architects. Thereon, we've taken the design to the next level, as local architects. So the biggest takeaway there is they are really, really process driven. So that is where their design excellence comes in. So that aspect of it, if we can plug in our design system, I think the future of architecture in India would be brilliant, because we have no dearth of great designers. We have great exposure. We do brilliant designs, and we know how to work with constraints. So all that is really great. But in India, we really have to really up the game on the processes. With that, I'm sure, the future of architecture would be really, really good in India.
So let's move on to the rapid fire round. What is the most overrated office amenity which you see?
Overrated, a lot of people talk wellness as a very wellness in a very loose way, or inclusivity in a very loose way. It's not that. It's about there are a lot of sum total of lot of experiences make you happy. The way people today view, sustainability, inclusivity, they're just words thrown. But I somehow feel a sensitive design is the thing which is the most inclusive design, sensitive to everyone. So let's say a person who is 20-year-old, how does he feel when they walk into your workspaces? A person who is, let's say, a pregnant woman, how does they navigate themselves into their workspace? Or a person who's got an ambulatory issue, like, maybe I had a fall. So for that 1 month or 2 months, my one leg is out of order. So how do I kind of navigate? So these are the aspects that you should think about. It's just not about people all clubbed under one umbrella. So that's something which you need to look at.
Concrete blutism or a glass curtain wall? What would you go for?
None.
What is your preferred material?
It's very specific to the requirement. So I really don't have preferences on materials per se. It's all about the materiality comes in what the design expects it to be. So glass when you think that transparency matters, brutalism when you think you want to keep the whole materiality, simple, or when you have a restraint in the material. Yeah.
Biggest productivity killer in a floor plan? What do you see it?
Noise.
Sustainability or aesthetic? Which wins the budget battle?
Sustainability need not come with a price. A very thoughtful design can be sustainable, but still can come within the price that you look at.
Your favorite iconic skyscraper or a building?
Maybe my future project.
The death of the assigned desk, is it a fact or a fiction?
So things are changing. I think post COVID, there is more of a free desk system. Unless there are few clients who need that kind of assigned desks. So maybe 20% of the workforce, forces need the 20 assigned desks, but 80% can still work on free seating.
So, ma'am, you got an opportunity to do a live demo for Architecture Playbook. What is your take on it?
I think you have done a lot of homework on that, and I'm sure a lot of people would have given their inputs much before I got to see it. So I see a lot of the problem statements have been covered in your architecture playbook. And like how I mentioned, the project details, I would say, as a ready reckoner would help. Maybe the details on that sanction plan that I was talking about and things like that, that would really help. And also in our projects, corporate projects, we have a slow camera which is installed in the site, so which also records the continuous process of construction. Maybe if that can be also integrated in yours, it will be nice. Let's say I've gone on a travel to the US for 2 months, let's say, and I want to know what's happening on my residence. It's always seeing is believing, right? So if I'm able to see the kind of a progress, it would be really nice. Maybe you can have these kind of a plugins, but I'm sure it's like really a great start, and a lot of people would benefit from this. And congratulations on that.
Thank you so much, ma'am. That was a word of boost for us to take it forward to the next level, and we will do that. Architect Vijaya, ma'am, thank you for joining us on Architecture Playbook podcast and sharing your journey, philosophy, honest learnings from your practice. Your insight on design, execution, and creating spaces with meaning will surely inspire our audience. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you so much. It was wonderful being with you.
Thank you, ma'am.